the 1990 Winston finals in Pomona, California. In Top Fuel, it took the very last race of the year for Joe Amato to clinch his third such title, placing him on the same racing pedestal as legends Don Garlits and Shirley Muldowney. Darrell Alderman emerged from his lightning-quick Dodge Pro Stock and an unbelievably close season-long battle to claim his first overall championship. And John Force, overcoming a season filled with fire and frustration, persevered through 9 months of fierce competition to snare the Funny Car Championship. All three heroes to the legions of fans who line tracks across the nation, and all three aware that the time for celebration is past, as the 1991 NHRA season is about to unfold. NBC Sports World welcomes you to the 31st annual Cheap Auto Parts Winternationals. The setting is an absolutely perfect one, as today we're in Southern California, where the weather is clear and the track has never been faster. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the LA Fairplex in Pomona, California. I'm Joel Myers, and the National Hot Rod Association season begins this afternoon. An 18-race season with $18 million at stake. All defending champions are back as well. In the Top Fuel division, it's Joe Amato. Right now, I'm in the pit area, the Funny Car champion, John Force, who won his first Funny Car championship last year, living out a fantasy, a dream come true. And also back in the Pro Stocks, it's Darrell Alderman. The big story, though, is in the Top Fuel division, where the quickest field ever assembled in the history of the sport is gathered here in Pomona. With more on that story, let's go over to Steve Evans.
Joel, in an amazing turnaround, that Top Fuel field is being led by the man who drives this car, Don the Snake Prudhomme. I say turnaround because in 1990, his first year back in the dragster ranks, Prudhomme not only failed to win a race, he destroyed 3 cars, and some people thought his confidence. Not so. In qualifying, a picture-perfect 4.93 second elapsed time, a track record, and a personal best. But not every driver who tried to qualify for the Elite 16-car field was as fortunate.
Hard to believe that California driver Russ Collins was uninjured in this blowover incident. Working with us today, 3-time Top Fuel champ Big Daddy Don Garlits, and you have experienced this, Don.
This is the phenomena of Top Fuel that you just can't hardly do anything about. The car goes out of your control. You cannot react fast enough to make any changes. You just hang on for dear life.
But one thing, Don, we had not seen before was that spiral Greg Louganis effect.
Well, Russ Collins was very fortunate that every time the car hit, it hit on something that absorbed energy. The front end, the rear tires, the wing struts. And that's what kept him from getting injured.
Again, we emphasize the car may have been a total wreck, but Russ Collins was absolutely unscathed.
A blowover like this, every driver thinks about it when he leaves his starting line. There's been so many of them lately.
Yeah, I really never thought about it. I never worried about this car doing it. And I always thought, you know, watching Ormsby and Hill and the rest of them, I thought, I'll stop it. But trust me, there is no way to stop this guy. And as fast as I think I am, boy, there's no way. It is instant. Just instant.
As we see it again, remember Big Daddy's words, how that car landed on points of absorption. The tires, the wing struts, the front wheels.
Without a doubt, the glamour division of the sport, but also the most dangerous.
Absolutely. Now Don Garlits is with another driver who has the fans buzzing.
Well, Steve, I'm in Shirley Muldowney's pit. Shirley, you're starting the year in Top Fuel racing without major sponsorship. That's tough, isn't it?
It's real tough. I don't think we'll go much beyond this race or the next one. I think that'll be it for this year. We'll work on 92.
But you're in the second round with a good time, and you're facing one of my old nemesis, Don Prudhomme. This is the first time that you two have raced in Top Fuel where both cars were right on the edge, running great.
Well, he's got himself one of those 4-second crew chiefs, but so do I. You know, I think we both have control of the horsepower, and he's a good driver. Well, we're both good drivers, so I think what the fans are going to see is a very good round.
Well, it's certainly going to be one of the better runs in the second round. Joel?
Another driver making a return to the Top Fuel division we're looking at right now is Tom the Mongoose McEwen.
And these Southern California fans, Joel, are darn glad to see the old Mongoose back. He had a 2-year layoff, and he's back thanks to Major League Baseball player Jack Clark, now the DH and first baseman for the Boston Red Sox, who funded this team. Frank Bradley from Santa Rosa, California. Bradley also running this year without any sponsorship, almost didn't even come to this event.
And Frank Bradley, if you're wondering what happened to the defending champion from the Winternationals last year, Lori Johns, well, Frank Bradley took care of her in the very first round. And Tom McEwen back in the thick of things once again due to his benefactor, the first baseman for the Boston Red Sox, Jack Clark.
Surprisingly enough, growing up as a teenager, Jack Clark's fantasy really wasn't being a Major League Baseball player, was it?
Well, no, I've always really liked the race cars and that lifestyle. And I don't know, I think that didn't mesh a lot of time with the baseball lifestyle, and that gave me a bad rap sometimes, but I had to be what I grew up to be.
Who was your hero growing up as a teenager?
Well, Don Garlitz, my father, always used to, that was our favorite. We used to take the pictures next to the car. So
have you ever met Don Garlitz?
I've never met him, no.
Jack Clark, excuse me. This is your life. Big Daddy, meet Jack Clark.
How you doing? Pleasure to meet you.
Yes, sir.
Well, if you need any tips, now's the time to get them.
Well, make it go fast, that's all, and straight.
Well, it seems to be running real good, Jack. I mean, we're real proud of Tom and the job he's doing out here on first time.
I don't think he'd have been this thrilled if he could have met Ty Cobb.
So we find out heroes have their own heroes, Don.
That certainly is true. I have my own, and right now Tom McEwen happens to be one of them. You know, I've been hearing him talk about getting in one of these top fuelers the last 2 years. I really didn't think he was going to do it. You know, these cars are not easy to drive. It takes a lot of energy, and I kind of thought Tom would just talk about it for a few years, and then that'd be all we know.
Well, Jack Clark has Tom on a physical regimen. He has lost 40 pounds. He's doing motivational work, everything to try to improve his reaction time to race a guy who's been racing consistently month in and month out like Frank Bradley. Can McEwen match Bradley out of the blocks? It is Frank Bradley. His wife Maggie loves this second round victory. Tom McEwen did lead with Bradley, but overpowered the racetrack. He saw the haze off the tires, indicating they lost traction. That's what beat McEwen.
Eddie Hill getting ready for round number 2, and you might remember for our viewers, it was just a couple of years ago, it was Eddie Hill who had a blow over here at the Winternationals.
And Joel, you can bet that's on Eddie Hill's mind because that was a bad blowover. Now, reigning Winston World Champion Joe Amato, that's to his advantage, and he wants to continue winning today. He'd like to just do another year just like last.
And at the finish line, Frank Bradley with Steve Evans.
Well, Tom McEwen hazes the tires, and Frank Bradley, that's all it took for you to drill him.
What did we run?
5:16.
Well, that's about what we had figured. Thought it might run a little quicker than that, but we got a new clutch system on here, and I don't know what to do with it just yet.
Might be all that near lane will hold.
That could be. We smoked tires last time. Backpedaled out of it, got down the racetrack, so we think, well, we got to do something, so we backed it up a little more.
See you next round.
Thank you.
Don Garlitz, the clutches are absolutely critical on this racetrack.
Well, Joel, the clutch is the most important device on the entire race car because everybody has over 4,000 horsepower and everybody runs on the same track. It's who gets that power to the ground properly.
And Eddie Hill has the talent to do that. After all, he was the first driver to ever record a 4-second elapsed time. Joe Amato, Old Forge, Pennsylvania, has lane choice over Eddie Hill because Joe in the first round ran a blistering 4.97 second elapsed time, quicker than Eddie's winning elapsed time of 5:39. Don Garlitz, how important is lane choice?
It seems to be very important at this racetrack, Steve. The drivers have really been favoring the far lane. The track looks all right, but there seems to be more tire smoking over in this near lane.
Amato up in smoke.
Just goes to show you that you can never tell the track by the previous round.
Well, Eddie Hill's crew goes crazy, and they know they were very lucky because Hill also had an awful lot of problems. He should have been beaten.
Well, he must have been thinking about that wheel stand from a couple of years ago because it was a terrible start. He backpedaled and he got back on it. You can see when he leaves the line, the car makes a funny little move. Watch as he goes out. Look at there. The car starts over to the right, but Amato is already up in smoke. The race is over, and Eddie Hill just kind of struggles and gets down the racetrack. Lucky day for the Hills.
So both drivers have their problems, but Eddie Hill holds it together and upsets the defending Winston Series champion. Let's head down to Steve Evans at the finish line.
That was a wild one, Joe.
Yeah, that was wild, but, you know, backpedaling racing, he won.
So only the second round of the first race of the entire season, and Joe Amato, the defending Winston champion, already gone. the defending champion, preparing his car right now in the funny car division, that of John Force. As we'll be right back. The Winternationals continuing from Pomona, California. The Chief Auto Parts Winternationals back stands in Pomona, California. The Snake, Don Prudhomme, who had the quickest elapsed time at 4.93, getting ready.
And of course, Don will be facing for the first time ever Shirley Muldowney, and a totally different set of emotions with these two drivers. Prudhomme tickled to death to be back on top, looking forward to a great year. That man, Ron Tobler, Shirley's crew chief and husband, and of course the lady herself, well, they're disappointed. This may be the only race they'll run this season. She hasn't said she's hanging up her helmet forever. Maybe we'll just have to wait for greener pastures. The three-time Top Fuel champ, Shirley Muldowney of Mount Clemens, Michigan, wants to fire a final shot. Don Prudhomme had the most miserable year of his career, all 25 years worth last season. He crashed 3 cars total, the final incident occurring in Montreal, Canada. Watch Prudhomme's car in the far lane. You will not believe what you see. A blowover, much like Russ Collins, except with a surprise ending.
I'll tell you, it was a surprise. He drove that thing completely out of the park.
But moments later, the Snake slithered over the guardrail onto the drag strip, absolutely untouched. The Top Fuel wasn't always so tough for Don Prudhomme. He won his first event in 1965 right here in Pomona, California. And he continued to win on the NHRA trail, including his very last Top Fuel victory at Indianapolis, the U.S. Nationals in 1970.
But Steve, then he went to Funny Car, where he dominated that division for over 20 years, winning 4 Winston championships.
And let's not forget that he's won over 40 races in the 2 divisions.
And the 1991 marks the Snake's silver anniversary in the sport of NHRA drag racing. He'd like to turn that silver to gold here today. Maybe won himself about $40,000 before it's all said and done.
No doubt about that, Steve.
Looking for a backer, Shirley Muldowney in the near lane. In the far lane, Don the Snake Prudhomme.
Shirley Muldowney gives the Snake everything she has, but comes up a car length short. Prudhomme wins it at 5:08 to Muldowney's 5:14. Muldowney, surprisingly, the faster speed at 2:78.
And we now move to the last pair in round number 2 from Lansing, Michigan. Veteran Dick LaHaye. Don, he'll be going up against Frank Hawley.
Another example of the sponsored car and the unsponsored car. LaHaye without sponsorship this year. But this man, Frank Hawley, driving for Darrell Gwynn, they have good sponsorship.
Don, how much does it take to run a car all year?
It takes between $750,000 and $1 million, Joel.
Unbelievable. Don the Snake Prudhomme is already in the semifinals. He's at the finish line with Steve Evans.
That's one you'll remember for a long, long time. A little bit special.
Yeah, they're all special right now because, yeah, racing Shirley and everything is always real special, you know.
You were complaining about the car shaking when you got out.
Boy, did it ever. I thought it was just over with because it got out there and it shook and I really lost all my vision. And then it finally ran out of the shake. We were really lucky, real fortunate.
A 5:03.
Thank you.
So when a car shakes like that, the driver like the Snake Prudhomme in that instance feels like he's going to lose traction and lose control. Back at the starting line, Darrell Gwynn anxiously awaiting the run of his driver, Frank Hawley.
Even though Frank Hawley didn't begin to fill in for the injured Darrell Gwynn until, well, mid-season last year, he still finished 9th in the overall points and won 2 races for the Gwynn family. Now, Dick LaHaye, he got off to a rousing start last year. He was in the finals of the first 3 races. He won that 3rd race in Houston. This year, racing on his own money, well, he needs that same kind of a start.
And speaking of starts, even though Darrell Gwynn has not been in a race car since that tragic accident last Easter, he still holds the record of 4.90.
Frank Hawley up in smoke all the way for Dick LaHaye. In a nice 5:09, this tricky racetrack likes Frank Hawley as it has so many, including Joe Amato.
We have now completed round number 2 of the Top Fuel Eliminators. Don the Snake Prudhomme rehashing that most recent race with Shirley Muldowney, and it's still a question mark how much we'll see of Shirley Muldowney during this racing season. So we now have our semi-final pairings. In one of the 2 semis, it'll be Frank Bradley going up against Eddie Hill. Bradley with the lane choice. And in the other semifinal pairing, Dick LaHaye matching up with Don the Snake Prudhomme. Prudhomme with the lane choice in that semi. We move to the funny car division now, round number 2. We're looking at Al Hoffman. Will be going to the far lane up against Mike Dunn in the near lane. On the very same track where John Force wrapped up his title last year. Let's join Steve Evans now with Dick LaHaye.
Dick, it appears as if you judged the racetrack just perfectly, gave it the right amount of power at 509.
Well, we was looking for something a little bit quicker now, but we'll take it as long as the wind light come on.
You may need something a little bit quicker than that. You have Don Prudhomme next round.
Well, Don's running awful well, but we're going to keep him honest. That's what it amounts to.
The man who usually runs conservatively may take a different tack.
Well, Dick LaHaye is running a small cubic inch displacement engine at this track, and that's one reason he's been able to maintain traction.
Yes, looking at Mike Dunn's funny car after the smoky burnout, you have to realize these cars make the same kind of nitro-fueled horsepower as the dragsters, about 4,000. But the wheelbase is shorter, the motor in front, and of course, the body the driver has to contend with. Now, Al Hoffman is having his finest outing ever. The man from Umatilla, Florida, qualified number 5. Mike Dunn, well, this is the season he pointed to. He ran a few warm-up races last year, and darned if he didn't win the Chief Nationals at the Texas Motorplex late in the season. Mike Dunn has all the tools and equipment it takes to be the 1991 champion.
But Al Hoffman is his career best at this race, Steve, of 5:36.
And he is hungry. A beautiful drag race until the last 100 feet when Mike Dunn asserts himself to pull out the victory at 5:46, 263 miles per hour.
So Mike Dunn, the winner in round number 2, as we'll be right back to the Winternationals in Pomona, California. Pro Stock semifinals coming up in just a few minutes as we continue with the Chief Auto Parts NHRA Winternationals. Joel Myers along with Steve Evans and Don Garlitz. And the defending champion Darrell Alderman getting his car ready for the Pro Stock semis. We continue, though, with the funny car division.
And this is still round number 2. And there you see a chalk mark they put on the pavement to make sure they back that car right back in those hot, sticky tracks accomplished by the burnout. That'll be Jim White as the roof hatch is closed. That offers a little ventilation for the moment on this warm afternoon in Southern California. And he's up against one tough customer. Ed McCullough will be in the near lane flying new colors for 1991. McCullough, even though he had his best year ever in 1990, was still outpointed narrowly for the championship by John Force. Now, you've seen this man, Jim White of Tulsa, Oklahoma, many times in our drag racing coverage. Would you believe he has never won a race? He's been low qualifier. He's made it to the final round. He just can't get that first big payoff. What a drag race. It is Ed McCullough overcoming Jim White's early off the starting line advantage. 5:45 to a 5:50. Considering that White was away first, the margin of victory, 3/100ths of a second.
Jim White takes a beautiful starting line advantage, and if he could have run like he run the rest of this event, he could have won this race. But Ed McCullough's car made a nice move out about 200 feet and got a little bit in front of him. Jim White held on quite well, but at the very end, you could see the power of the McCullough car take the win just by the ever slimmest of margins.
About as close as they come for Ed McCullough, who has now made his way to the semifinals. We continue with the funny car division and Chuck Edgels from Putnam, Connecticut.
I get the feeling after watching the top fuel dragsters, the funny cars are also taking a very conservative approach. Everybody trying not to overpower this racetrack. You smoke the tires, chances are you're beat. And I know that's the philosophy of this man, Chuck Edgels from Putnam, Connecticut. We saw him win his first ever NHRA national event, the Summer Nationals, here on Sports World last year. And of course, everyone knows that, Grant. John Force, the wild man, the champion from Yorba Linda, California.
And Steve, no one has captured the imagination of the fans of this sport like John Force has over the last year. Force in the far lane, near lane, Chuck Edgels.
John Force with a sensational driving job. Force on and off the throttle to a 5:31. Let's go to the starting line. Don Garlitz is with his crew chief, Austin Coyle.
You seem to be holding the most steady.
Well, it's pretty loose out there, and he had to pedal it a little bit, but he's the best there is at all that, and I guess we'll have to count on him to help us through this one.
So on a tricky track today, Austin Coyle confirming what Steve was just talking about. A great driving job by John Force, who's with Steve now.
You
have been more nervous about defending your title than you were winning it.
Steve, you be a truck driver and you come out of that, spend 18 years trying to win, and then you win the World Championship and you red light on your big day. It killed the whole winter. It was terrible. And today I got a chance here in 2 rounds to prove that I was a quality driver for this team. I got the Coyle and the whole bunch behind him, and I'm proving I can drive their car.
You bet. 541.
Good, thanks.
And John Force referring to the foul light that he got in the very first round of the Winston finals here last year.
He had already clinched the championship, but he feels like he let the fans down. I don't think they feel that way, but he still has that lingering memory. Well, this young man, Richard Hartman, he is in tough. He is up against Glenn Micras of Riverside, California in the Joe Paisano car. Now, Micras has never won a race, even though he has driven a variety of cars, but he's the #1 qualifier here at a 5:28. Hartman, only 22 years of age, could walk home to Laverne, California. You can almost see his house from the top of the grandstand. He has one final round appearance just last year at the Cajun Nationals.
So 2 of the youngest and most talented drivers in the funny car division getting together, and both local products, Micras from Riverside and Hartman from Laverne.
They stage these cars very carefully in those electronic beams. When the top 4 yellow lights are on, the start could come as quick as a half a second.
This is the most critical point in drag racing.
Even though Micras is all over the racetrack, the crew celebrates a 5.32 elapsed time. He keeps up that pace from qualifying. Glenn Micras puts away Richard Hartman.
So we now have our semifinal pairing in the funny car division. It'll be John Force taking on Ed McCullough. Force with the lane choice in that matchup. And Glenn Micras taking on Mike Dunn. Micras with the lane choice in the other semi. We move to the semifinals now in the pro stock division. It'll be Tony Christian going up against Darrell Alderman, the defending Winston champion. And don't forget, just like John Force in the funny car division, Joe Amato in the Top Fuel Eliminators, Darrell Alderman, the defending champion, won his title on this very same track in Pomona, California. Steve Evans?
Well, Joel, Don, there'll be no more suspicion about that near lane now that Glenn Micras has fired a 5.33 down it.
Yeah, she ran pretty good right on down through there. We got caught in our clutch still. We're still fighting it a little bit, and Joe made the right call again. You know, the Oldsmobile ran right on down through there.
A lot of the drivers are telling me they're having to pedal the car, get on and off the throttle. How about you?
First lap, yeah. This lap, I could drive her. Just hold her on the floor.
It was hooked up, obviously.
Thanks.
A huge win for Glenn Micras as we move back now to the starting line of the pro stocks.
And Darrell Alderman's competitors thought maybe on the first day of qualifying they could get a leg up on the Dodge because Alderman wasn't even here. He was stuck at an airport somewhere in the Midwest. He made it and qualified #1. Now, Tony Christian has been a nemesis of a lot of drivers, including Darrell Alderman. You'll remember last year here at the Winston Finals, it was Christian who upset Alderman and prevented him from winning the event title after he clinched the Winston Championship. Sweet revenge for Darrell Alderman over Tony Christian, a winning 7.28.
Darrell Alderman on his way to the finals. We'll have more of the pro stocks when we come back to Southern California. Welcome back once again to Pomona, California. The Chief Auto Parts Winter Nationals is Jerry Ekman, the defending champion of the Winter Nationals, hoping to get into the finals in a matchup with Darrell Alderman.
And his yellow Pontiac is not the only yellow to be found on the grounds. Everywhere there are ribbons and flags as fans and racers alike pray for the safe return of our men and women from the Persian Gulf just as soon as possible. Jerry Ekman's opponent will be Warren Johnson, and one of them will face Darrell Alderman in the final round of pro stock. Johnson's Oldsmobile at this point in time may be the car to beat as far as elapsed times are concerned. Well, Jerry Ekman and Warren Johnson would both like a return engagement with Darrell Alderman. He robbed both of them of a possible title last year. These cars leave the starting line darn near as hard as a dragster or funny car, even though they're about 1,000 horsepower on gasoline. It's a beauty. It's Warren Johnson really showing some steam on the far end of the racetrack. 7.23, Ekman a tenth behind.
So we have our final pairing now in the pro stocks. It will be Warren Johnson, the winner in this last round, going up against Darrell Alderman in the finals. Johnson, don't forget, will have the lane choice.
And back in the funny car pit area, there's this scene, and it's not uncommon, Don Garlits and Mike Dunn's pit or anybody else's.
They take them completely apart and look at every part. Every moving part has to be inspected, because when you make 4,000 horsepower out of 8 cylinders, there's a lot of strain on every component.
So Mike Dunn getting ready for his big challenge against Glenn Micros. And that brings us back to the top fuel division now. It's the semifinals. Frank Bradley going up against Eddie Hill.
You know, Don Garlitz, 30 years ago, these dragsters were 100 inches long. Now they're 300 inches long. And they've gained all that wheelbase in the interest of stability. And that's fine going down the racetrack. But they never counted on the repercussions of that. And that's the blowover like we saw earlier with Russ Collins.
That's right. When the car gets a little bit off the ground, it doesn't take very much pressure to flip it over, because that leverage that helps you get the traction also helps you lift the car up.
Well, Frank Bradley has never experienced that, and we hope that he never does. Eddie Hill well knows what it feels like. This is the semifinals. The yellow car is Eddie Hill. The blue car is Frank Bradley. It appeared at first as if both cars would get a hold of the racetrack. Not so. Eddie Hill up in smoke at half track. That was all Frank Bradley needed to turn a 5.15-second elapsed time into a winner.
So Frank Bradley in the finals, and what a turnaround it would be for Don the Snake Prudhomme, Don Garlitz, if he could make his way into the finals after the type of year he had last season.
It sure would, and it seems like he's on the way, but he is facing a competitor who has got an idea that a small cubic inch engine is what you need here today, with this traction being a little bit edgy.
And of course, Dick LaHaye knows this track very well, winning the Winternationals on this same track in Pomona back in 1988. Let's go to the finalists. Frank Bradley with Steve Evans.
Frank, you took a very smart combination to the starting line.
Track's scaring me. It's getting a little slippery out there, and I mean, we really don't know where we're at with this clutch yet, and I'm afraid to put any more power to the racetrack, so I figured, well, we'll just take a chance on it.
You gauged it perfectly at 5:15.
It's not bad. I'm happy with that.
You'll be happy going to the final round.
And Don, he is concerned about the clutch. Earlier, we were talking about Dick LaHaye with the engine. So many things concerning these drivers.
Well, you see, it's the start of a new year, and everybody's trying new combinations to try to get that little advantage, that little edge on the competitors. This is when you must do it.
Prudhomme and LaHaye in the semis.
Goes to the final round in the fours. Again, $4.99. And you can bet his crew and his family knew that at one point their Dick LaHaye was ahead. Don Garlitz is on the starting line with the newest Nitro wizard, John Medlin.
Right on course, John.
Well, we got lucky. That time the lane held up, and we found a little problem back there, and it picked the ET up. So we're real optimistic about the final.
I don't call $4.99 lucky.
Got to have a little luck.
So what a turnaround it's already been for Don the Snake Prudhomme after a year he'd like to forget about during 1990.
And Joel, you can see Dick LaHaye take that starting line advantage. And if he could have just had those cubic inches that all weekend he's been saying that he didn't need, you can see he needs it right there. Look at that big motor of Prudhomme's pull out there and hold that car off right up to the end. Dick LaHaye's car ran good at the end, but not quite good enough.
So we have our final pairing in the top fuels, Prudhomme and Bradley. And Prudhomme with the lane choice is down to the finish line now with Steve Evans.
Don Prudhomme in a hurry to get back to the pit stack of $4.99.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's, getting the semis here isn't too bad. Now we just got to get through the race and win it now.
What a special moment that would be. 25 years ago today, he won his first NHRA national event.
A huge crowd on hand at the Chief Auto Parts Winternationals in Pomona, California. And welcome back once again. Joel Myers along with Steve Evans and Big Daddy Don Garlitz. And we are ready now for the semifinals in the funny cars.
And what a wonderful matchup this is. John Fords, you're on board with him, versus Ed McCullough, the #1 and #2 funny cars in the sport of drag racing, respectively. Arguably the two best drivers in funny car racing, and probably the two best crew chiefs. Austin Coyle for John Fords, Bernie Federley for Ed McCullough. All the ingredients are here.
Absolutely no love lost between these two.
No, there isn't, but still a good modicum of respect. John Force decisively goes to the final round. Another great driving job. Another terrific lap time. 5:31 to McCullough's losing 5:41. Force off the mark first as well.
And again, John Force driving a great race. So he is on his way to the finals and back in the pit area. Frank Bradley right now. His crew is changing blowers. Is that dangerous right now before the finals, Don Garlitz?
Well, it certainly is. But I guess Bradley has figured that 5:16, 5:15 that he's been running is not going to be able to handle the Snakes 499. So he's taking a shot.
We're now back to the funny car division and the other semifinal. Two very good friends going up against each other in the semi matchup. We're looking right now in the near lane at Glenn Micras. Mike Dunn will be in the far lane. But let's go to the finish line now with Steve and John Force.
Few men have ever driven a better funny car race, John Force, than you are today. Working that throttle perfectly.
It's great. You'd think you was running St. Louis. I tell you what, McCullough was out there. I don't even know what happened, but he put in that pressure, and we left on time, and the car did exactly what it's been doing. Coyle said, we don't even want to change it. It works. Just be prepared to pedal it, and that's what we're doing.
By old St. Louis, you mean it's slick?
St. Louis, she's a little slick, but that makes a real drag racer's drag race. It does.
St. Louis slick. He's not a little worked up, is he? Is he ever having fun? John Force already in the finals of the funny car division. The other semi, it's coming up right now. Mike Dunn and Glenn Micras.
Interestingly, Mike Dunn is as familiar with the car in the near lane Glenn Micras is driving as Glenn is, because he formerly drove that machine for car owner Joe Paisano. Glenn Micras with the ride of his life. 5.28 seconds, a speed for a funny car. 284 miles per hour as he goes to the final round.
Mike Dunn makes a beautiful starting line move. Watch that car move out in front of Micras. But that Paisano bunch builds some strong horsepower, let me tell you, as evidenced by that 284-mile-an-hour top-end charge. Poor old Dunn never had a chance that time.
So let's go down to Steve.
Few things can silence John Force down here, as you well know, guys, but this man did it. Glenn Micras at 5:28 was a shot.
Well, we thought we'd give it a shot this time. We knew Mike could probably step up because he'd like to probably beat us as bad as we'd like to beat him in this race. It was a good race.
You've been knocking around this sport for a long time. You've driven some pretty scary automobiles, and finally you're headed for a final.
Yeah, first one, and then what can I say? I owe it all to Joe and the guys and Oldsmobile and JP1, and I don't know how to do it.
Go get them.
So thank you. Thanks.
You can tell by the smile on his face, a super run for Glenn Micras. What an advantage with the good time. He has lane choice now against the defending Winston champion in the finals. That's John Force. Back in the pit area, major league problems for Don Prudhomme's crew. They found a faulty fuel pump.
And that means they may have to change their entire tune-up procedure. And you can tell by the look on Don Prudhomme's face, he's not happy about it.
We'll find out more about the developments with Don Prudhomme. But up next, it'll be the finals in the Pro Stock when we come back to Pomona. Don Prudhomme getting ready for the finals in the Top Fuel Eliminators as we welcome you back to the Chief Auto Parts Winternationals in Pomona, California. And Don Garlitz, that faulty fuel pump has his crew working frantically.
They have not fixed the car yet. Don is just dressed to save time. He's going to actually get in the car and get ready to go, but the car will not be repaired yet. They're hoping to repair it as they proceed to the starting line.
Talk about pressure, it's definitely in that camp.
And I'll tell you, in the Pro Stock final round, which we have right now, I think the pressure is on that man, Darrell Alderman. Warren Johnson, his opponent, has been the quickest car on race day. Qualifying times don't mean, oh, there's problems with Warren Johnson's car. His son, Kurt, is inside the vehicle. That's where the electrics are located. My guess would be some kind of electrical problem. They're begging for time from starter Buster Couch. Buster says, nope, the clock has run out. Darrell Alderman will win the Winternationals on a solo run. What a shame for Kurt, Warren Johnson, Warren's wife Arlene, but what a break for Darrell Alderman. 7:28, 188, which is slower than Johnson's last time. You can almost see Alderman smile from here. Not so for Warren Johnson. On the starting line, Don is with crew member Greg Anderson.
Can you give us some kind of a tip what went wrong?
Yeah, the fuel pump fuse blew out. It's one of them 20-cent parts.
Y'all were running so good.
We're running very good. We're real happy with the way things are going so far. We're going to be all right, I think. It's one of them things.
Just one of those things. The misfortune for Warren Johnson and his crew gives the championship at the Winternationals to Darrell Alderman. Back in the pit area, though, Don Prudhomme's crew still working, as Don Prudhomme is now climbing into that car to help them out time-wise. So as the sun begins to set in Southern California, will that car be ready? Let's head down to the finish line with Steve and the champ, Darrell Alderman.
Need I say that was the biggest break of your career?
Hey, it was a break because Warren just ran a 23 the round before, and you know, we just haven't found our combination back, Steve, from where we qualified at a 722. But we'll take this win because we've had our bad breaks too.
Yeah, you've been there. You know how badly Warren feels right now.
I certainly do, and I feel for Warren Johnson because he's drove good all day long, and really this should have been his race.
Great start on defending the championship.
It sure is. Thank you very much. Hey, one other thing. I'd like to thank Mopar and Dodge Motorsports, and I want to dedicate this one to the boys over in the Middle East.
Outstanding.
So we have a champion of the Pro Stocks, and now we will determine the champion in the funny car division. That's will be John Force, the defending Winston champ, going up against Glenn Micris.
I'd have to tell you, the odds makers would have had Glenn Micris going into this event, probably about 40-1, and Force at about 3-1. Force in the far lane, Glenn Micris in the near lane, but Micris has the hot hand. He has lane choice and lower lap time of the entire event. They'll take plenty of nitro flame with them down this Pomona quarter mile. Micris explodes the supercharger. John Force has won the Winternationals. A fiery blast from the Micris car as he got near that center line. Force wins at 5:31. Emergency crews rolling out, but it appears the onboard fire extinguisher has done its job.
As we watch this replay, we can see that Force had made Micris kind of nervous with that hole shot, taking a starting line advantage, and he got over toward the center line, backpedaled the car, stepped back on it, and of course that hydraulic the motor, and he blew the supercharger up. Here you see it from the front. You can see the flames go down just momentarily, and that's all it took to cause that engine to backfire.
Let's join Steve now with St. Louis slick John Force.
John Force more concerned about Glenn Micris' health after that engine explosion than his own victory. John, what a way to start it off, huh?
What a way, but these are friends that if I was going to get whooped by anybody, this is the team I'd wanted to do it.
That's the way it ought to be, the two quickest cars head-to-head.
They're bad. You're bad. I'm glad you're okay. Old Coyle told me out there, he said, Force, by the computer, she's shaking, but you can get through it. I said, no, Coyle, I know this thing. It's beating me. He said, I think it's a roll cage. They're too tight in it, and it's creating that rattle. He says, it'll go through it. I said, well, if you're wrong, you go see the crowd, because I ain't going. And it trucked through there, and I started to step off the gas, and it just went right through it. And I said, you know what? We're okay. But it was shaking me so bad into the lights, I clicked her a mile early. Did you see that? She would have ran a 20. I had my foot out of the chutes out, and I saw the cones go by. I said, great, great.
Whoever said it was easy to drive in a straight line? John Force.
It's a shame he's such a shy guy. I don't know about you guys, but I need an interpreter when he gets on the mic. Don Prudhomme has changed that faulty fuel pump. But will it be enough to overtake Frank Bradley? That's coming up next from Pomona. The finals in the top fuel division.
I saw the cones coming. I thought, oh no.
The Force family celebrating. John winning the championship of the Winternationals. Alongside John's wife, Lori, and his daughters, Ashley, Brittany, and Courtney. And what a great start to the season for the defending Winston champion. Well, the sun is beginning to set. It has been said, Steve Evans, that when the sun sets, the best times come up in Pomona.
That is very true, and it has been for a number of years. The lanes are equal and better than they probably have been all year long. Don Prudhomme wondering if this car will even start. They prime the fuel injector with a little gasoline. They'll turn the engine over. Yes, it does start. Don Garlitz, that's got to be a relief in itself.
Yes, it is. A lot of pressure on Don there, sitting there wondering. Remember, it's never been started with those new pumps.
But how will it perform? The starter motor also hooked to the supercharger on Frank Bradley's car, and that engine comes to life. Bradley may not have the big corporate sponsor, but he's got a lot of friends watching TV in Northern California that threw in 100 here and 1,000 there. Joel, this is kind of a matchup, I guess, of underdogs. You don't think of Prudhomme being an underdog, but after last year, he certainly is. Bradley, well, wasn't expected to maybe even be in the pit area, so this is really a surprise Top Fuel final.
Two that you did not figure to be in the finals. Lori Johns back again, the defending champion. She was knocked out very early. Joe Amato also gone after the second round.
Well, Prudhomme's car really sounds good considering he's got untested fuel pumps on there.
And Bradley's car sounds better than it has all day thanks to that new supercharger. And one person named Prudhomme who's holding her breath is Don's 17-year-old daughter, Donna. Now, hard to believe that she has never seen her father win in a Top Fuel dragster, because the last time that happened was 18 years ago. She wasn't even born yet.
And Steve, you had an opportunity just a few minutes ago to talk to Donna about watching her famous father as he goes for the championship today in Pomona.
When your dad rolls to the starting line, what do? Are you nervous? Do you shut your eyes?
I don't get nervous until they finally light up our car, and then the time I really get nervous is when the top two lights on the Christmas tree light up and I'm chewing on that pen.
Looks like 1991 is going to be a lot more pleasant year for the Prudhomme family.
I hope so. I really do.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Donna Prudhomme nervously, anxiously awaiting the final. Her father in the near lane. Frank Bradley in the far lane. It's finally here. The 31st annual National Hot Rod Association Winternationals in Pomona. And it's the Top Fuel Finals.
Trouble for both drivers, but with alert driving, Frank Bradley has beaten Don Prudhomme for the Winternationals title, and his wife, Maggie, savors the moment.
A new champion at the Winternationals. Last year, Lori Johns. This year, it's Frank Bradley with the disappointment of Donna Prudhomme.
What an interesting race, Joel. We see Bradley take a starting line advantage from Don Prudhomme, but both cars have trouble. Prudhomme's new fuel pumps evidently delivered too much fuel, and Frank Bradley, he lost a little traction. He had to backpedal. Prudhomme tried to get back on it, could not get the car to recover. Frank stepped back on the car and cruised on out and got the Winternationals win.
Let's join Steve now with a new champion.
Aren't you glad you came to Pomona? You almost didn't.
I almost didn't. I'm glad I came to Pomona.
You knew you were in tough against this, Nick. He had some problems, but still.
Yeah, I put a brand new blower on it and figured I'd step it right up, but it did. It stepped it up too much and smoked the tires, but I guess he did the same thing, so.
He had more problems than you did.
That's it. Sometimes that happens, huh?
Now, this prize money will help keep you going.
Yeah, it'll probably get us another race or two out of the deal.
Well, the way you're running, you may have some more in your future.
Yeah, very possible.
Great job.
Thanks, Steve.
So in a final that no one could have expected, Frank Bradley outdoes Don Prudhomme. Disappointment, of course, with the Prudhomme camp, but they have to be encouraged by the start they got this year in the first of 18 races. So that does it for the 31st annual Chief Auto Parts Winternationals in Pomona, California. For Steve Evans and Don Garlitz, I'm Joel Myers. Thanks for joining us.